You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Thursday. We're back. It's a huge show. This is one of two today, rare 2 podcast day, but have to do it because we have a gigantic guest in store for you today, as promised. I'm not even gonna announce myself because I don't even need to. Gotta announce Joel Klatt. That's the color commentator of Fox Sports. He'll be calling the game on Saturday in East Lansing, Michigan versus Michigan State. Joel, so happy to have you on again, man.
Yeah, it's good to be on. How you doing, Isaiah?
Oh, just getting into the nitty-gritty of this game. It seems like every time you dig deeper, there's something else that kind of comes to the surface. So I'm interested to hear your perspective. So with that in mind, first off, like, how do you see this game when you look at these two teams, both 7-0? They seem in a lot of ways like mirror images of each other with just a couple differences. When you look at these two teams and how they match up overall, what do you see?
You know, I initially thought that, and the more that I dug and studied Michigan State, I just feel a little bit differently. You know, I think from the outside looking in, it's easy to think, oh, they both run the football. Kenneth Walker leads the nation in rushing. But Michigan State's offense is very different. And while they are committed to and rely on the run game, they're much more explosive. And they've got the element of Peyton Thorne, his ability to affect the defense with his legs, and also the ability to be explosive in the passing game. I think Michigan State's offense is far more explosive than Michigan's. Michigan is more methodical. In particular, last week, I've done 3 Michigan games now. No, I'm sorry, 2. This will be my 3rd. And, you know, the first one I did, they threw the ball pretty well and against Wisconsin. And they did not against Northwestern. So I think I still have some very serious questions about Michigan's offense. Where's the ceiling? How do they create explosive plays? What are they going to be in the red zone? Who can win a one-on-one matchup? Whereas Michigan State, I don't feel that way. Now, what's fascinating to me is, you know, I think both defenses are good. Michigan's probably a little bit better. But one of the things that Michigan does as a team from a complementary perspective, far different than Michigan State, is that they protect their defense. You know, Michigan State sees over, on average, 80 plays per game. There's only, I think, one Power 5 team that has faced more snaps than Michigan State. You know, so you would think that they're built similar, but they're really not. You know, Michigan State is more explosive. They allow their defense to be on the field far more than Michigan, well over 100 snaps more through 7 games. So I'm fascinated to see how that all plays out, in particular because I think everyone's expecting these 2 mirror images to face off against each other, and I think that it's very, very different than that. And to be quite honest, I feel like we will have a very different game than people think that we're going to have. I actually think that this is going to be a bit more high scoring than what some think. Some think it's going to be, you know, run, defense, low scoring. I think we're going to have a lot of explosive plays, and I genuinely believe that we might get into, at least for Big Ten and Michigan State sake, a bit of a shootout.
Very interesting, and I'm obviously curious to see how Michigan's offense would handle that. They were able to do it against Nebraska essentially in the second half when they were behind. Ever since then, really, there started to be questions about Cade McNamara and his capability of throwing. Like you mentioned, against Wisconsin, he was able to complete those downfield passes. So what is your evaluation of Cade McNamara at this juncture?
Well, I think that he's very consistent. I think that he does a lot of things to help them win. He's efficient. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's not flashy, but he's also exactly what they needed. I don't think let's put it this way. I don't think that they're 7-0 without Cade being the starting quarterback. I don't think that they can reach 12-0 without JJ being the quarterback. It's a fascinating position that they find themselves in, where they're trying to toe the line between getting a young, talented quarterback ready, like breaking a young colt, and also making sure that you're doing the things necessary through the thoroughbred, the consistent, older, more veteran guy that gives the team the best chance to win. So at some point, they're going to have to take their ceiling above where Cade takes them. And I think that Cade is a good player. And I know that this always sounds like a knock on him, and it's not. I really don't believe it's a knock. Can he play a little better? Yes. I think that if he concentrated more so on throwing in rhythm down the field with his feet and the accuracy downfield in terms of ball placement, I think that he tends to just be a thrower down the field, whereas he will pass the ball in the short and intermediate zones. Mm-hmm. And the great downfield quarterbacks pass the ball down the field. They understand leverage and ball placement down the field. And that's a step that he could potentially take. But I do think that they have tried to play this as best they can, knowing that there's a good chance that somebody, maybe this week and maybe down the road, is going to require them to take their offense to another level. And at that point, I think they will be more comfortable than most going to a younger player that has gotten a lot of experience here early without having to be the starter. And I think that that's a question that I have in my mind. And again, it sounds like a knock on Cade, and it might be unfair to Cade, but that's the way that I view it.
Now, staying with the offense, one of the things that it intrigues me about this game, and really for both teams, because we've seen Kenneth Walker, he's putting up Heisman Trophy-like numbers, but he's run into a brick wall twice this year. Michigan has been relatively consistent. Yeah, they had the second half against Rutgers. Some people look at Wisconsin and say only 113 yards. I look at that and say that's incredible given what Wisconsin's giving up. How much do you think, if Michigan State is really trying to stop the run, how much success do you think that Michigan, with the tandem backs in Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum, how much do you feel like they're going to be able to still be able to get what they want on the ground?
Well, this is not going to be a knock against Michigan State, but I don't believe that they're as stout as Wisconsin's defense. I think that's fair. Having said that, Michigan ran the ball pretty well against, all things considered, against Wisconsin's rush defense. So from my standpoint, it was their ability to stay committed to that. Remember, Wisconsin's the number one rush defense in the country. They're giving up 1.8 yards carry, 1.8, which is crazy. Now, Army ran the ball fairly well against them, but Army is Army. They ran it 50 times. It's a unique style, and I think that it's just different. The only other team to just sniff positive yardage was Michigan, 112 yards, a touchdown, and the commitment to that run game is what opened up some of that passing down the field. So while Michigan State is very good against the run, I just think that Michigan will have some success. Now, it might not be 250 yards, but I think that they'll run for over 100 yards. And that's something in this matchup that you look at the history of this matchup, whoever runs the ball more efficiently and wins that rushing battle generally wins the game. Now, having said that, again, I'm coming into this, maybe I'm totally off base, but the way that Michigan State defends the pass is not great. Mm-hmm. And Michigan, while they haven't been fantastic throwing the football, during that Wisconsin game, they showed the ability against a really good team to be able to win on the outside. That's why I think that we're going to get into a bit of a shootout. Michigan's Achilles heel on the defensive side is giving up explosive plays. That's one thing that Michigan State does really well on offense is they create explosive plays. I think we're in for a higher scoring affair than most people realize.
Now, keeping kind of on that idea, the Michigan State offense going up against the Michigan defense, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about what Michigan's been able to do over the course of the year, because it feels like, aside from, like, I think the secondary is much better, of course, right, compared to last year, but it's still a work in progress. And then you've got Aiden Hutchinson, and then you've got the emergence of the rest of the defensive line and the outside linebackers, however you want to call it, in Mike McDonald's system. How much do you feel like Michigan's going to be able to have success going up against the Michigan State offensive line, get to Peyton Thorne and such? Because certainly Michigan State's going to want to replicate what they did last year, get rid of the ball quickly, try to go downfield, and get at those cornerbacks. So how much do you feel like Michigan will have the ability to impact the game with its defensive front?
Well, they have to. Their edges have to play great. I think that, I look at guys like Aiden, obviously, but Jenkins, Morris, Ojabo, I think that they've got to play with great edges against this zone team, because when you play with great edges or hard edges, what you do is that you don't allow them to get the lateral movement in your defense that is required for the zone scheme and the run game to be very effective. And so that's a major part of this, because what happens if you don't have the hard edge and that defense starts to move laterally, all it takes is one little crease, and Walker is very good with his vision, his explosiveness. He'll find that crease and create success in the run game. So they've got to create the hard edge and allow the linebackers to play in a tighter area than what they would normally have against that style of scheme. I do think that they'll be fairly successful at that. I don't think that the game plan last year against Michigan is something that you can employ this year, because the coverage is just so different. The structure of defense is so different. Last year, I always say, like, last year, Michigan had basically like one tool in the tool chest, and it was really, really good against lesser opponents. And that's why they were always so high statistically in defensive metrics, total defense and scoring defense and so on and so forth, is that nobody else had as good of players as Michigan. So they were able to dominate. Now, what they've done is they've changed the structure of defense, and it doesn't allow them to dominate to the point that they did last year or years previous under Don Brown, but it also creates more tools in the tool chest for when you do face teams that have similar athletes or are starting to get after you and you need to adjust. They didn't have any way to adjust prior. And so once it started to go bad, it went really bad. Now it's different, because while they give up a hair more yardage here and there, statistically speaking, they've got answers. And what you're doing to try to attack them, they can combat that. So I don't think that Michigan State can just come out and be like, hey, we can replicate last year's game plan, or one thing is going to allow us to have success versus another. They're going to have to attack them in all areas. I think Peyton Thorne's got to be able to run the football. That's what gave them some troubles against Rutgers, is Rutgers was running the quarterback, and that stretch zone read scheme gave them some fits in that second half. Now, having said that, the defense made critical plays in that game in order to win the game. The problem was more on the offensive side. They couldn't move the ball. So from my seat, like this defense, while maybe not as dominant against lesser opponents, at least has the ability to adjust themselves in order to start having success once they get beat. Now, you might say, like, well, what happened against Nebraska? Nebraska had to use what I would call like unique and creative play calls and concepts in order to beat individuals that didn't use their keys. That's what happened in those touchdowns. They got misaligned on one of the touchdowns inside the 5, and then everything else was eye discipline. There was a totally illegal formation that they got a touchdown off of, blatantly illegal formation. And then the others were, non-discipline with the eyes from the defensive backs. Long-winded answer to basically say, like, I think that Michigan's defense is more suited to go through this stretch late in the season than they were a year ago. But whether that comes to fruition or not, I'm not sure, because Michigan State can create explosives.
One last one for you, because got to get you out of here. You can give it to me however short or long as you want to, but Michigan wins if, and the converse of that, Michigan State wins if.
Yeah. So Michigan wins if they are committed enough to the run game where they can create success in the passing game. If they do that, I think that they've got a great chance to win. Now, if this becomes just a throw first and throw only game, Michigan is not suited for that. We all know that. Conversely, Michigan State wins if they're able to make this a throw-only game. Not that I don't think the Michigan State offense against the Michigan defense, doesn't matter or anything. I just think that the more unknown for me is the Michigan offense, Michigan State defense. I think those are each the weaker of the two units on the team because they have a glaring weakness on the team, the pass defense for Michigan State and obviously the pass offense against Michigan. So if Michigan's offense is able to run the football enough, again, they don't have to be dominant, but run it enough, similar to Wisconsin, in order to affect the defense and throw the football accordingly, then they win. If Michigan State forces them to drop back against that excellent pass rush, Jacob Panasiuk and the like, then Michigan State will win. So that's where it comes down to, is Michigan in obvious passing situations too often, and is Michigan State able to take advantage of that?
Well, awesome. Thank you for all of that. Certainly just incredible insight, and just counting down the minutes to get to noon when the game actually kicks off at Spartan Stadium. It should be an incredible environment. Joel Klatt, he'll be on the call with Gus Johnson. It'll be on Fox. Fox Big Noon Kickoff is there. It's the big game, the biggest game you're going to find anywhere in college football on Saturday. So thank you, Joel, for joining. Really, really appreciate it.
You bet. Have a good day, Isaiah.
Thank you. You too. That's Joel Klatt. How about that? It's been a while since we've had him here on the Locked On Wolverines podcast. I'm sure that many of you weren't even listening back the last time that we had him on the show. So excited to have him back. Of course, I talk to him, part of Wolverines Wire, at least once a year. So nonetheless, awesome to have him back. We are going to continue the show. We continue having big guests. We have Audrey Dahlgren. Spoke to her on Tuesday. So if you're watching, never mind the complete change of outfit. So we'll bring her in here momentarily. But before we do have to take care of a little bit of business. First off, I want to talk to you a little bit about SweatBlock. You know how much I love SweatBlock. I'm lost here. Anyway, for a few weeks now, we've been talking about it. These wipes stop sweat for 7 days, and it seems like people have been listening. We have friends of Locked On who have tried SweatBlock and love it. We have a story about a high school teacher. When he'd pit out by fourth period, he'd hear the snickers and whispers from his students, so he started bringing a second shirt to change into in between classes. Then he heard about SweatBlock on our program, and he tried it, and he is now hooked. No more Snickers, no more shirt. Straight out of Hollywood, we have a producer who was working on the set of a Marvel movie. Maybe you've heard of it. She was working 18-hour days for weeks in the Atlanta heat. She heard about SweatBlock, started trying it, and loves it. No more sweaty production days. She even reports that one of the A-list actors uses it. Maybe the green one? Oh. Try to stay dry on set and on the red carpet. Another success story here is about an avid soccer player who heard us talking about SweatBlock and thought it was too good to be true. But he was always the wettest guy after practice and in games, like soaking wet, so he thought he'd give SweatBlock a shot. He tried it in his pits, and the next practice his pits were dry while everything else was wet. Guess he should have tried it on other parts too. He says he didn't have to reply for 9 days. Now he's a true believer. So there you go. Locked On with listeners loving SweatBlock. So stop excessive sweat For up to 7 days per use, this doctor-created, doctor-recommended dry shirt guarantee. If SweatBlock doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back, not just for armpits, for chest, back, feet, hands. Use it anywhere. I mean anywhere. That sweats. So if you or someone you care about is dealing with excessive sweat, you have to check out SweatBlock. Get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with the promo code LOCKEDON, or you can get them at Amazon or CVS. All right. This episode of Locked On Wolverines is also brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect. The place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose. It's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping on a long road trip to rest your legs and to refuel. Certainly that certainly could be on my list coming back from East Lansing. I know it's not a long road trip, but coming back from East Lansing, I'm going to be hungry after a long emotional game. McDonald's has got to be the place to go, right? You can go there after a Little League game, after the Michigan State game. You can connect to Wi-Fi when you need to get work done. One of my former interns actually used to go to McDonald's and use their Wi-Fi after games. Did it every single week. That's a true story. Birthday parties. Anyway, head to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect. Did somebody say the Locked On Wolverines watch party? Yeah, probably not, because I'm going to be at the game. But something to keep in mind. McDonald's, ba-da-da-da-da. I'm loving it. We are continuing with this. Apparently, it's going to be a really long show. We talked to Joel for a little bit longer than anticipated. I talked to Audrey for quite some time as well. So without further ado, here's Audrey Dahlgren from WLNS. All right, and as promised, we are continuing the Guestapalooza when it comes to trying to figure out what this game is going to be. So we welcome on Audrey Dahlgren, the sports director over at WLNS. She's also the host of is it called the Audrey podcast? Do I have that right?
Close, yeah. Audrey Dahlgren show. Very simple.
I see on Instagram, I see the Audrey and that's where I was going with that.
People call me Odd, so they highlight the first three letters, and then the re is at the end, but yeah, Audrey Dahlgren show.
So Audrey, also you have the brand spanking new coaches show with Mel Tucker. So you have a little bit extra insight because you get some one-on-one time with the head coach of Michigan State. I don't know where you're at with the week. I probably should ask that in the pre-show, but I am terrible. So let's just go ahead and say, what's his tenor been like from what you've been able to tell going into this week? Obviously, he's 1-0 against Michigan. This one's a little bit different than what he experienced in year one.
Yeah, it's completely different. The rivalry in general. I mean, this is the most historic meeting between both of these two teams. And so it's obviously the biggest game in his career, I'd say. Well, as a head coach, not in his total career, because he's coached in really big games before, national championship games at Ohio State and Alabama, other rivalry games. So, but those were as assistant coaches, not as, the head boss man in charge. And so I would say right now, he is a guy that is very even keeled. He does not get too high. He does not get too low. And that is what it's been like all week. Even yesterday when, he had his press conference, and then we sat down and did our thing for the coaches show. And it was the same thing. He's like, it's Tuesday. I am not even going to get into, that intense game mode mindset until, Friday, Saturday rolls around. Obviously their practices are very intentional as they go throughout the week. They're going to be very physical. He brought that up, which as you would expect, but, early in the week, he, like I said, he just is very even keeled, keeps his emotions in check. And that's what he also tries to preach to his players as well.
And, I had heard that just about him in general. Back in the summer, I got to I know Kalen Gervin. I know he's transferring away from the team, but I've known him since his recruitment, since he was like a sophomore in high school, and saw him in an event over the summer. And I asked him how is it going? What's the difference between D'Antonio and Tucker? And I figured he would be like, yeah, D'Antonio was more intense because the face that we see with Mel Tucker tends to be, kind of calm, and everything. He's like, oh no, it is way more intense under Mel Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, behind closed doors, it's definitely, yes, he wants to win. He won't settle for anything less than, above average. Like, he's not going to tolerate any type of nonsense, I guess you would say. And he has very, very high expectations. And a lot of that stems from, one thing about his mentors are Nick Saban, Kirby Smart. Romeo, I'm getting his name wrong right now, but
Romeo Cornell.
Yes, exactly. So, you think about the coaches that he's worked with, and then you also add in the NFL portion of it. Those are all cultures of winning right there.
Yeah, and I'm really curious just to see this game. I have no idea what to expect, right? Like I kind of have pivoted because for a while my thought was, and I got roasted by Michigan fans. Now I'm getting roasted by Michigan State fans because for weeks I said I think Michigan loses this game. I think Michigan State's more complete, and then they had their game against Indiana, and it was the same kind of ebb and flow as it was against Nebraska. So it was like, all right, when this team meets a good defense, the offense kind of stalls a little bit. With that in mind, like what are you seeing as far as the tenor of this team, having been around the players and the press conferences and such? How do they feel? And I don't know if they've been asked at all about that portion about going up against the Michigan defense, but what is your feeling being around the players and how they're feeling about going into this game?
I think that they're ready. I think they feel confident. And they also don't shy away from the fact that they know that they've had some offensive issues and have struggled in a couple of games, as of late, from the offensive standpoint. To not have a first down in the game at home against Nebraska before they won in like that wild fashion. And so they know that they need to work what they need to work on, but they also understand too that, they still have confidence. I think they're very versatile. I think their offense is very versatile. They have a lot of firepower. I think Jay Johnson does a great job. He's done a great job this year when it comes to play calling. We've seen a lot of different things, wrinkles, you want to call them, when it comes to Michigan State's offense this year that we haven't seen in years past. And so I would not be shocked too if they're working on some type of, I don't want to say trick play, but I definitely think that they're probably going to institute a lot of different things in this game against Michigan, maybe that we haven't even seen. I don't know if they'd utilize their tight ends a little bit more. I think it would be smart of them to incorporate their tight ends a little bit more from an offensive standpoint. And then, the big thing is obviously Kenneth Walker as well. That'll be, I'm curious to see how that's going to play out against Michigan's defense.
Yeah. Yeah, I am too, because I think a lot of Michigan fans now they felt probably really confident about it. And then Evan Hull from Northwestern busted out a 75-yard touchdown. And I feel like Michigan Stadium had a collective gasp knowing what's coming next week. Considering, just the big plays in general that we see. So how do you, when you look at this game, give me your I guess your 30,000 foot view when it comes to Michigan. You're right on the ground when it comes to Michigan State. You don't have to give me an actual prediction, but yeah. How do you see this game going in your eyes?
I see Michigan State winning this game. And I'm not saying that because I cover the team, etc. We do the coaches show with Mel Tucker, none of that. I just think from an offensive standpoint, I feel as though they have more versatility and more firepower than Michigan, because as you know, Michigan does a phenomenal job running the football. They're fifth in the nation right now in rushing yards. They have 25 rushing touchdowns. And so they have two very great backs. Hassan Haskins, love that kid, by the way, because I covered him in high school when he was at Eureka, just outside of St. Louis. And I actually covered his commitment to Michigan State. And so I love the success that he's having with Michigan's football program right now. But I just think that from, like I said, an offensive standpoint, I think that, and I don't know with Michigan's secondary if they can contain some of these big plays that, Peyton Thorne and Jaden Reed and Jalen Naylor, that they've been able to rattle off in previous games.
Yeah, and I still like I've said I swapped my prediction. I went from being Michigan State until the bye week for Michigan, and then after that game, I said I think it's going to be a close win for Michigan. I'm not confident about it. I don't think anyone is confident that they can say they know for sure which team is going to win. I have a shirt that I'm going to be wearing on the sidelines that says I just hope both teams have fun, because that's how I feel. Anyway. Awesome to have you, Audrey. Appreciate you coming on and joining us. Wealth of knowledge, and you're doing an excellent job over there at WLNS. I pay attention from afar. And so if you're in the East Lansing area, or the Lansing area rather, somewhere in central Michigan, you should be watching WLNS and the great job that Audrey and her entire team do. So thank you.
Thank you, Isaiah. I appreciate that. Nice little plug there.
All right. Awesome. That was Audrey Dahlgren from WLNS. Thank her for joining the show. Very excited to have her. Been working with her off and on for over the course of years, just, in colleague type. But we haven't actually worked together. So that's cool to have her. Anyway, we are going to move on. But I have a couple things that I do need to talk to you about. And that's going to start with rockauto.com. Now, rockauto.com is a family business. They've been serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. Go to rockauto.com to shop for auto and body parts from hundreds of manufacturers. They have everything from engine control modules to brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet, whether it's for your classic or daily driver. Get everything you need in a few easy clicks, delivered directly to your door. The rockauto.com catalog is unique. It's also remarkably easy to navigate. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle. Choose the brand, specifications, and the prices that you prefer. Best of all, prices at rockauto.com are always reliably low, and the same for professionals and for do-it-yourselfers. So why spend up to twice as much for the same parts? Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, finishing out here, just a couple thoughts since we don't have a heck of a lot of time. We're also, this is, like I said, episode 1 and 2. We got the Michigan mailbag that will be also coming out on Thursday. Expect that this will be our early afternoon deal, and then we'll have the we'll have that more in the actual evening, I'm sure. You can also check out Locked On Big Ten. We'll be on that by the time that this is out. I'll probably have already been on it. Anyway, so lots going on in thoughts of this game. Joel has me a little bit more nervous about Michigan's prospects given the way that he posited everything. Audrey obviously is very confident in Michigan State's chances. I'm going to stay with my original thought that Michigan and its defense is going to be able to do to Michigan State what Indiana and Nebraska were able to do. To some degree, I think Michigan State will have more success than they did in both of those games, but I think that Michigan is well suited to be able to stall that offense. I think Michigan State will have some moments of success. Like, I don't think it's going to be like I don't think it's going to be anything like the 2018 game. Michigan State will hit some explosive plays, as Joel alluded to, but I think that Michigan will certainly also have some success as well. It's going to be able to find ways to get some things done. I'm optimistic that if you listen to Spartans Palooza on Wednesday, I hearing both Rico Beard and Matt Sheehan talk about the offensive line for Michigan State going up against Peyton Thorne. If Michigan can keep contained, which is important, I do want to note that Joel, when he talked about the Rutgers game, Michigan was without Josh Ross in that half. I think that played a big key. So I think that Michigan with Josh Ross, it's different in that sense. So I am optimistic that Michigan is going to be able to get a lot of these, that they're going to be able to force Peyton Thorne off his spot. And then it's what do you do from there? Do you contain him? Certainly, they did a good job with Adrian Martinez. Joel talked a lot about eye discipline and things of that nature. You have to, considering that's all we've heard about in the last couple weeks coming out of the defensive coaches and the players, that clearly has been a point of emphasis for this Michigan defense. So I think they'll be able to do enough. And I think the big question is, what does the offense do? Because it isn't like for a fact that throwing the ball is gonna work the way that you want it to. If they get Roman Wilson back, that would bode well. Dalen Baldwin can step up, that would bode well. I'd like to see more AJ Henning. I'd like to see if Mike Sainer still's the target. It's like Jake Butt said on X's and O's. I'd like to see him run under the ball instead of go up and try to high point it. So there's a lot of those things. So we'll see. And we'll talk about it with Jake Butt a little bit more on the Friday podcast, the preview. So we've got 2 more podcasts coming up for you this week on Locked On Wolverines, the Michigan mailbag, as well as the preview with Jake Butt. So stay tuned to that. Thank you for watching and or listening this one. Thanks to Joel Klatt. Thanks to Audrey Dahlgren. So appreciate them both spending time with us. We will talk to you soon. Thank you for watching and or listening. Peace.